his father and mother, and cleave to his wife, and they shall be one flesh. With those 20 words, the Creator announced the ordination of the family, long before he established the two other great human institutions, the government and the church. Notice that there was no mention in this verse or any other of same-sex marriage. More than 5,000 years have come and gone since that point of origin, yet every civilization in the history of the world has been built upon it. Despite today's skeptics who claim that marriage is an outmoded and narrow-minded Christian concoction, the desire of men and women to leave and cleave has survived and thrived through times of prosperity, peace, famine, wars, epidemics, and every other possible circumstance and condition. It has been the bedrock of culture in Asia, Africa, Europe, North America, South America, Australia, and even Antarctica. Given this unbroken continuity, one might begin to suspect that something mystical within human nature must be drawing the sexes together, not just for the purposes of reproduction as with animals, but to satisfy an inexpressible longing for companionship and intimacy and spiritual bonding. Indeed, how can it be doubted? It finds its expression in the institution of marriage. Marriage represents the very foundation of human social order. Everything of value sits on that base. Institutions and governments and religious fervor and the welfare of children are all dependent upon its stability. When it is weakened or undermined, the entire superstructure begins to wobble. Admittedly, there have been periods in history where homosexuality flourished, such as in the biblical cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, in ancient Greece, and in the Roman Empire. None of these civilizations survived. Even where sexual perversion was tolerated, marriage continued to be honored in law and custom. But as we all know, liberal forces within the American culture are working night and day to bring about a redefinition and complete restructuring of marriage. As you have heard, the New York State Legislature voted to legalize same-sex marriage on June 24th, making it the 6th state in the Union to take this momentous step. How ominous this is for the welfare of the nation. With one vote, wrote Family Research Council President Tony Perkins, New York forced more Americans to bow to its twisted definition of marriage than the combined population of Massachusetts, Connecticut, Vermont, New Hampshire, Iowa, and the District of Columbia. And none of it would have been possible without the political cowardice of New York Republicans. It's true. Passage of the legislation had been made possible by Republican legislators who abandoned their earlier opposition after being enticed by huge campaign contributions from Wall Street and from homosexual activists. Former Republican National Committee Chairman Ken Mehlman raised $1 million for the campaign, and leftist millionaire Tim Gill and his Gill Action Fund sweetened the deal with enormous contributions. A few words describe the flip-flopping by 4 members of the GOP. They are bought off, duck and cover, self-serving, and caved in. There was jubilation in the state capitol as Governor Andrew Cuomo strode onto the Senate floor to wave at cheering supporters who crowded into the galleries to watch. Among those celebrating the victory 4 days later was President Barack Obama, whose administration has been working behind the scenes to promote the redefinition of marriage. While he has professed from the days of his campaign not to support same-sex unions, these are his candid reactions to the decision in New York. Quote, This administration, under my direction, has consistently said we cannot discriminate as a country against people on the basis of sexual orientation. And we have done more in the past 2.5 years that I've been in here than the previous 43 presidents to uphold that principle. And he continued, what I've seen happen over the last several years and what happened in New York last week, I think was a good thing, because what you saw was the people of New York having a debate, talking through these issues. I then said, this is phony baloney. In what context did the people of New York have a debate about same-sex marriage? They had no say in it. Marriage was hijacked by liberals and political power brokers in New York and throughout the country. Ultimately, they had their way. Speaking again of the president, the New York Times reported several weeks ago that he is on the verge of publicly endorsing same-sex marriage. The White House has been debating when to come out of the closet for some time. The Times also said Obama recently attended a fundraising gala with the gay community, end quote, and hosted a gay pride reception at the White House. Sounds like the fix is in, doesn't it? You'll recall that the president also ordered the Department of Justice not to defend the Defense of Marriage Act, DOMA, in the courts, despite the fact that in 1996 the Senate passed that legislation by a vote of 85-14, and the House of Representatives approved it by 342-67. Then President Clinton signed the bill, and it has been the law of the land now for 16 years. Because the Department of Justice has been ordered not to defend DOMA against attack, it may soon be struck down by the courts. That would affect the citizens of nearly every state in the nation. Obama, acting like an autocratic justice, simply overrode the actions of the Congress. The separation of powers prescribed in the Constitution was ignored. Clearly, the president is committed to homosexual activism, including implementation of a radical social experiment. The family is facing formidable foes in every dimension of the culture. The most powerful among them is the federal and state courts, which are determined to impose their will on the American people. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit is a prime example of this threat, which may soon declare Proposition 8 unconstitutional. That amendment was enacted by 7 million Californians who declared marriage to be exclusively between one man and one woman. If Proposition is overturned, the case will likely go to the U.S. Supreme Court, where anything could happen. If there ever was a time when Christian people should fight for what they believe, this is it. Solidarity is critical, and yet, regrettably, some Christian leaders are saying that the battle has been lost and that the family of the future will be increasingly compromised. Some have even told their constituencies to get used to same-sex marriage. They are tragically wrong. We have striking new evidence that public support for marriage as an institution involving one man and one woman is rock solid, despite what the cultural elites and the politicians and judges are trying to accomplish. Divorce is still a serious problem, of course, but the majority of Americans believe in the traditional definition of marriage. Further, it isn't losing ground, it's gaining support. Consider these findings. The Alliance Defense Fund, led by my valued friend Alan Sears, recently commissioned an organization called Public Opinion Strategies to conduct a national survey on marriage. The Public Opinion Strategies regularly provides polling for members of Congress, the Wall Street Journal, National Public Radio, Fortune 100 companies, and many others. In response to the request by the Alliance Defense Fund, Public Opinion Strategies surveyed more than 1,500 adults in May 2011 And get this, they found that 62% of Americans agreed with the statement, "I believe marriage should be defined only as the union of one man and one woman." Only 35% disagreed. Other developments validate these findings. Voters in 31 states have participated in statewide elections for the purpose of defining marriage. All 31 of them, without exception, have defined it exclusively as being between one man and one woman. The results were the same, whether they were in large states, small states, liberal states, conservative states, prosperous states, poor states, industrial states, and agricultural states. The majority of the electorate came to the same conclusion. Here's more hard evidence. In 30 of the 31 states referred to above, 63 million Americans voted on constitutional marriage amendments, and 40 million of them, 63% of the total voters, affirmed marriage as the union between a man and a woman. In the 31st state, Maine, voters overruled their state legislature and governor, who had signed the same-sex marriage bill, and restored marriage as one man and one woman in their state. Can there be any doubt how the majority of our citizens feel about this issue? Despite this good news, I'm still deeply concerned about the institution of the family. It's because I fear the people will not be permitted to make decisions for themselves and the country. Given the imperious courts and the influence of liberal politicians, the wishes of the American people could be overridden. It's a battle for the very soul of the nation. What would be the consequences of losing this culture war? It would be a social and international disaster for 6 reasons spelled out in my book, Marriage Under Fire. Luann and Ryan, I talked about those reasons last time, and this letter is a little long for the program. So I'm just going to read the items themselves, but not go into the detail.
And actually, Doctor, that entire content is available online at familytalk.org. Or better yet, I would encourage listeners who are not receiving your monthly letter to go ahead and sign up there at familytalk.org to receive that.
Well, I sometimes spend as many as 20 or 30